Hello, folks. It's This Week in History with Mike and Will. I am Mike.
I'm Will.
And as we do every week, Will finds a day in history that matches up with this day and now, and then tells me about that day and why it's significant.
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on how I'm explaining this thing.
I think it's fun that it's different every time.
It's a little better.
Well, we could have a thing, but I feel like that wouldn't be us. If we had a script.
He has 1 hour to do this.
Wow.
With time down here, and that's the rules of the show.
Mm-hmm.
We also have the globe back there in case we need to check out anything. We never do.
We did once.
We did once. All right, well, let's find out if we do today.
Yeah.
All right, so today we're talking about Vox in Excelso, which happened on March 22nd, 1312. 1 hour to first explain Latin to me.
So, the Vox in Excelso was what's called a papal bull. We've talked about these before.
It's a thing
It's
they
a
say.
thing that the Pope writes, and it's like a rule. Or
Is that like short for bulletin?
I think maybe. They always just call it a bull. Let's check.
I bet bulletin
It's just
is
a decree. And it comes from a seal. It's
Okay.
under seal, and that is the bulla.
Oh, okay.
So
I still gotta imagine bulletin and bull have
it's
some
probably
sort
tied
of
together.
connection.
It's probably
Yeah.
tied together because they're these big, fancy, formal papers that are scrawled out.
Yep.
So you can kind of see. I'll hold it up to the
Papal
little screen.
bull.
So that's that's not going to work at all.
No, we'll
I
have to do
should've-
this. Ready?
Papal bull. There. Yeah, I love that.
Okay.
We'll handle that in post.
Remind myself to do that.
Put a papal bull in the thing. So this was passed by Pope Clement V. He was relatively new at the job. We'll explain all that, what it means.
Who?
Clement V.
Clement.
Clement V. So somebody named other popes Clement before this.
Clement sounds like a country pope.
Yeah, I'm Pope Clement. How y'all doing?
Here we go.
My daddy's name was Clement.
You
His
want
dad.
to hear my papal bull? I'll tell you
My
all
name's
about
Clement. This is my brother Clement. My other brother Clement.
it. I'm Clement V.
And this is Diocletian. Not really sure.
All right, so Pope Clement.
Pope Clement issued
like a nice
this,
guy.
and he's complicated.
Oh,
He basically
that usually means bad.
he didn't do a lot of the horrible stuff.
Mm-hmm.
He followed actually a pretty good pope.
Okay.
Well, actually, he followed a kind of a placeholder pope, and that guy followed a good pope.
Got it.
But the good pope was ripped apart in history because he made enemies. So we'll go into all of that and what that was. But first, we're going to read what this thing was,
I love
because
reading.
I actually have the whole thing.
The
So
papal bull
this-
from Clement V.
from Clement V, and this says, in view of the suspicion, infamy, loud insinuations, and other things which have been brought against the order, and this is the order of the Knights Templar, this is who he's talking about, and also the secret and clandestine reception of the brother of this order, so they had like this initiation ceremony into the Knights Templar,
Okay.
and nobody knew what it was
Secret.
unless you were a member, as a secret.
Secret
I
Society.
didn't like this. So, in view, moreover, of the serious scandal which has arisen from these things, which it did not seem could be stopped while the order remained in being, and the danger to faith and souls, and the many horrible things which have been done by the very many of the brothers of this order, who have lapped into the sin of wicked apostasy, and that's disagreements with the church, or being a former member of a church. So, apostasy, the crime of detestable idolatry, and the I hate this word, execrable outrage of the sodomites, which literally can mean anything. Sodomy covered all the bad ones. It was only very recently meant to be gay.
Is acceptable like excrement?
Execrable. Yeah, I think it's like, this is like what you'd pass out of your body. Execrable. It is not without bitterness and sadness of heart that we abolish the aforesaid order of the temple, and its constitution, habit, and name by an irrevocable and perpetually valid decree, and we subject it to perpetual prohibition with the approval of the Holy Council, strictly forbidding anyone to presume to enter the said order in the future, or to receive or wear its habit, which is its clothing, or to act as a Templar.
Sounds like the dean is upset at the deltas again.
The damn Animal House, always getting up with trouble. So yes, what this means...
It sounds like a fraternity that did it.
They did a bad.
They did too wrong.
They did a bad.
You know, they don't
They
get their...
stole the mascot,
That's right.
and they did something bad to it in public, and that's
So
what
now
the
no one can have any fun.
So
All right.
what this is that Pope Clement the Fifth,
Clement.
decided he's going to pass a bull that said the Knights Templar are dissolved.
Great.
So now we're going to talk about who the Knights Templar are, where they come from, and why this all happened, because it's
Sure.
actually really complicated.
So the day that we're talking about is the day they are done.
They're done.
And,
They are
but
officially
what
dead.
you're mostly going to talk about today is them before that.
A little bit before, but then like why this happened, because
Okay.
it's crazy why it happened. So we'll be talking about like a period of about 5 years,
Okay.
and just very briefly who the Knights Templar are, because there is a huge amount of myth surrounding these guys. You know, you got the Da Vinci Code. You have the legend that the Masonic Temple comes from the Knights
Wasn't
Templar.
they in that? Wasn't that in the Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yes, they're
Last
the
Crusade?
Holy Knight. Yep, Last Crusade. Yep,
That's where I get my history
That's
knowledge from.
That's right. I should have checked to see if that guy was one of the Holy Order. So, because the Knights Templar were founded by 9 guys.
9 guys.
It was 9 very poor knights.
Who decided that working together would be better than?
So the concept of the Holy Order here, they were originally called the Poor Fellow Soldiers of Christ and of the Temple of Solomon.
Oh, okay.
So the Temple of Solomon is, I think it's called the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It's this massive mosque in Jerusalem that was built allegedly on the site of the Temple of Solomon,
Okay.
which is considered one of the most holy places in the world,
Sure.
because it's like the center of the Jewish faith, it's the center of Christian
Oh,
faith,
yeah.
and it's the center of Muslim faith, because they built their temple there. They didn't like knock down the old temple
Yeah.
and build it. It was allegedly, I think, destroyed by the Romans. It was destroyed several times.
Isn't that the spot then where they're gonna build something and that'll be the sign of the apocalypse?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of those. Build it up.
That's one of those
Yes, this
apocalypse.
is the Temple Mount. This is what they call
Yeah.
it. They talk about this in everybody's history.
So apparently, a real nice place to put a temple.
Yeah, it's a great place. So when Jerusalem was taken...
Location.
Religion is all about it. It's all
That's
about
right.
it. That's why Jerusalem is a hotly contested place. Because originally this is, like the most sacred site for the Jewish faith, because King Solomon was the wise. He was
Cut the baby in half.
cut the baby in half.
Is that that guy?
And yes, and they
No.
didn't, because that was
Good-
the whole
yeah.
point.
Yeah. God, would that have gone bad?
Yeah, it's like, wow, I totally
Cut the
missed-
baby. That his whole reputation's on that. If they're
It
gonna cut the
is.
baby off, they go, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, the worst, the stupidest, the king ever.
Yeah,
The
that
king
would be the
himself?
worst
Yeah.
king ever. Just like, wow, I really badly
Go
miscalculated.
down, go down in history as the stupidest king ever.
Stupidest king ever. He badly miscalculated the selfishness of these 2 people. That's my baby. No, it's my baby. All right, we'll just cut it in half. You can each have one. No, don't kill the baby. You're clearly the mother. Instead, it goes, fine. I only wanted half anyway.
Now get the left half.
Oh God.
You got to cut it this way. You can't cut it because no one wants the bottom half.
No one wants the bottom half.
No.
Nobody wants the bottom
Ugh.
half. Ugh. Yeah. I mean, really, I don't want half of
Sure.
a person.
Right.
It's just
Yeah. Well,
cut him in half.
Either way,
It's gross.
we digress.
So fortunately, he didn't do this.
Good.
Solomon, sacred person. He's very sacred because the Jewish faith is the foundation of Christianity and also a founding faith of Islam.
Oh.
It's all the same God. Islam is based on. They feel that the Islamic faith is a continuation of the previous 2.
Okay.
And it is the culmination of all of this worship.
Boy, I wish people would talk about that more in general.
We could. We could. That's
well,
coming up.
it just feels like, and now it's they feel presented farther apart than they are.
Yeah, people like to fight about it, and
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
big difference between how some of the faiths spread, for instance.
Sure.
But really, it's largely about conquest of territory. The Jews expanded; they were the Israelites. They conquered.
Yeah.
They took in other cultures. They beat other cultures to protect their faith.
Yeah.
Then the Christians show up in the Holy Land and go, "This mine now," and they took it. And then the Muslims did this. Like everybody's
Accent suspect, maybe. I'm not sure if that was the right accent.
This mine now.
Probably
Maybe.
not. I don't even know that accent.
I mean, they were
is.
called the Franks, so it's
Either way, I think what we've shown though is that religion travels best at the tip of a sword.
Very true. That's amazingly well put.
Thank you.
That's very good. So yeah, so this region originally was Jewish. The Romans took it.
There we go.
The Romans held it for a long time.
Yep.
They let everybody kind of practice their faith.
Do your thing.
They had a problem with Jesus.
Yep.
They didn't call him Jesus.
Classically written down in a book somewhere.
Jesus is written of in Roman history once as the Christ. They call him the Christ. That's somebody's figure. Suetonius talks about him. He's like, yeah, this guy started a rebellion, so we killed him. It was annoying.
We thought we should write it down.
And he's a footnote in Roman history.
Interesting, but he is a note though.
He is a note. And then the Christians show up in Roman history after that and get co-opted by the Romans. It's a whole thing.
Sure.
But anyway, so then eventually the different what are considered like Arabic tribes or Turkic tribes, different cultures in their area, are pretty much tribal warriors. Like they were nomadic, most of them. But then you also have like the cultural centers in Baghdad, which was like the gem of the world for a very long time. It's right in the center of two rivers, in the middle of a like desert area, but it's very rich.
I do want to interrupt to say that locally, regionally here, we would call Two Rivers Trivers. There's a city nearby called Two Rivers.
But the locals,
Trivers.
Trivers, correct. Right. So in Baghdad, they probably call it Trivers, but in Iraqi, so Arabic, Trivers. With an Arabic accent. I think that's how that works. I don't know.
That is exactly how it works.
I don't have my translator here to tell me how it goes. When I was in Iraq, I had a guy who specifically would translate things for me. Don't have that anymore.
Yeah. It's a shame you don't have someone walk around with you.
Thank you, Tony, the translator, for doing all of the work for me.
Tony, the translator.
That was what his name was, because you want the bad guys to know your real name.
Sure.
So anyway, so these groups fought over basically ownership of Jerusalem, and eventually a caliphate took it. A caliphate is a religious run. It's kind of a mix of religion and politics.
It's like a monarchy, but religious. Monarchy.
Yes, right. Yes. It rules by the grace of God, and it's Islamic.
Yes.
And I think it was the Abbasids or somebody else. But anyway, they end up holding Jerusalem. The Crusaders show up in 1099, take the city. It's a big event, and then they start wanting to have more pilgrims come to the city. People wanting to express their faith, visit the sites. Specifically, they want Christian pilgrims, but they'll take other pilgrims too. Because when the Christians took Jerusalem, they killed everybody in the city.
Oh, we need people.
And Jerusalem was a multicultural and multi-religious city, so they killed Christians and Jews and Muslims, women and children. They killed everybody they could find. We'll talk about it someday. It's horrible. Okay. So, like you said, tip of a sword.
Yeah.
But really, it was not about the city. It was
my follow-up to that religion travels best with the tip of the sword, but also if it has to do that, maybe rethink your religion.
If your religion is founded on kill the other guys,
we have to kill them to convince them it's a good religion.
Yep, that's not.
Maybe it's not a good religion.
if you're, especially when your key prophets are all like, don't kill each other.
I mean, if I made a car and the only way I could sell that car is by murdering someone's family, maybe the car is not that good of a car.
It has some broken principles.
There might be some reasons why they aren't buying the car.
Maybe they're not wanting it. It's like, but it has 3 wheels that are positioned differently, and it looks like a leaning cardboard box, and it actually is made out of cardboard. Mm-hmm. Buy it for $20,000.
Stab. All right.
Yep. And you don't want it? Murder. Now who wants to buy the car?
Okay.
I'll buy the car. Yeah. Even though it kind of sucks.
This metaphor makes a lot of sense.
It's a great metaphor. Good job.
Well done, me.
Good job. You get a pat on the back from me. That was a good one. So anyway, this city now is starting to take in pilgrims.
Yes.
But because this has been a war zone for so long, there's a ton of banditry. There are religious extremists on different sides who don't like the transition of power. There's local nobles who are extracting serious tolls that can only be described as robbery. And basically, hundreds of pilgrims are either being murdered or robbed on their way to the city.
Ooh.
Of all stripes. So,
that's rough.
Yeah, it's really rough. So this guy named Hugh de Payne is a Frenchman.
Hugh de Payne?
Hugh de Payne. It's Hugdepayennes. Hugh de Payne. Who Hugh de Payne? Yes. So Hugh de Payne is... he's a poor knight, but he's a man of strong faith.
Oh, who's he paying? No one.
No one.
He ain't got no money.
All his money goes to God.
Oh, okay.
Well, basically, it's enough. He has enough to furnish himself as a knight.
Wait, so, he's a French knight?
He's a French knight. And he was a crusader. I think he took part in the crusade that took the city. Okay. I think he was of age when that happened.
Sure.
But anyway, he has kind of this spiritual awakening. There's a legend about it where he had like a vision of Jesus and he was given the Holy Grail and all of this other stuff. That's all obviously legend because nobody saw it. Nobody ever held the Grail.
But you can't say he didn't.
So that's used a lot. But really what it boiled down to is he went to the king, Baldwin, who was one of the Crusaders as well. And he's
King Baldwin.
King Baldwin II.
Okay.
He runs what they call the Levant, or in Europe it's called Outremer. But it's a series of cities and strongholds that basically are on the eastern edge of the Mediterranean, and it's where like modern day Jerusalem and Jordan, parts of Syria, parts of Turkey. It's this cutout, and it's surrounded by everybody.
Okay.
But that's what the Crusader states were, and it just kind of dangles down and covers all these holy cities. There's this very wealthy city of Antioch, and there's the city of Acre. There's the city of Edessa.
Oh,
and there's all these
nice
cities.
places.
They're nice places. And then there's a million other cities in between. Well, not a million, but a bunch. The major seaport was Jaffa.
Oh.
That's where everybody landed and went from there. So in the city of Acre, though, they decided to find this order. This is where Baldwin is approached by Hugh de Payne. I just like how
That one
you
sounds like
react.
a made-up name.
That one does. Well, they all are.
Well, it also sounds like a wrestler's name.
Yeah. I'm Hugh de Payne. I'm coming to tell you, brother, that I'm going to form a holy order of knights to defend the pilgrims, because we're coming for you, bandits. Yeah.
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 I think
Hugh de Payne. Hugh de Payne's coming today, folks.
Emphasis made like paying sound like pain.
Pain.
Yeah.
Hugh de Payne.
Hugh de Payne.
Hugh de Payne. Who's the Payne? Hugh de Payne.
Yeah.
So Hugh de Payne, huge pain, huge pain shows up, and he asks the king and says, "Look, these people are being beaten and murdered, and sometimes they come in big like trains of people, like 100 some odd people, and they get massacred.
Ugh.
They're pilgrims.
They're just people.
They're just
They're
pilgrims.
refugees, really.
Pilgrims
probably.
are not
Pilgrims?
armed. Pilgrims.
No, they're going to the thing.
They're going to worship.
Yeah.
So these are people who
Just
don't
trying
carry
to-
weapons. Like that's a whole part of the pilgrimage.
Yeah.
Like some of them are walking barefoot to show like their devotion to God.
Yeah.
They have enough to get them there. They have some coin to donate. Like these aren't wealthy people. But
So
they're
when
just
they
getting
do,
massacred.
when they're getting killed, then are they then like feeling martyred? I don't know.
I mean,
what
they
they're-
don't want to be.
No one wants to be the martyr.
They're not wanting to be, but they
I'm-
kind of are,
Yeah.
incidentally, because they're just and these are like common folk.
Yeah.
These aren't like rich. I mean, there are some rich people. I feel like they would have cared more if it was rich people.
Sure.
But rich people, when they would go on a pilgrimage, would be surrounded by knights.
Right.
And knights are terrifying. Knights are on war horses that are trained to fight. They are covered from head to foot in sometimes double layered chainmail armor. Chainmail is technically not a proper word. It's just mail. But it sounds weird.
Okay.
Chain is just 1-on-1 links. Chain mail is like 4-in-1. It's a whole
Okay.
nerdy armor thing.
We'll have an
Chainmail.
armor discussion
I
later.
can do an armor discussion. But anyway,
Check out our subreddit.
check
that
out
we don't have.
we don't have it. We're not allowed to have because I'll just argue.
Yeah.
It's not good. So, but yeah, so they're wearing this heavy mail armor
Yep.
in the Middle East, which is a terrible idea,
Yeah.
I think.
Chafing hot.
It's super hot, and then they have layers of padding under it.
Yep.
A big helmet to
Yep.
protect their head. They have at least a sword, a shield, and a lance, but sometimes other weapons.
Sure.
Probably daggers.
And should they just survive dehydration, they will murder you.
They will murder you. So that's what a knight does. Well, so Huge Pain talks to Bald and says, look, so the peasants can't afford guards. We will guard them.
Oh, that's nice.
We don't have any money, but that's what we'd like to do. So if we could just have a place to work out of
Okay.
and some food, we'll be good.
This sounds very reasonable.
It's very reasonable. And it's just him and 8 other guys.
all right.
And it's 8 other guys. This isn't like, a couple of peasants show up with sticks. These are trained killing professional types, but they're very strong about their faith and they want to protect the pilgrims. They don't want money out of it. They're not seeking wealth or fame. They just feel it is their duty to their fellows to protect the roads.
Now, I've not seen The Dirty Dozen or Seven Samurai, but is this like that?
This is like that.
Okay.
It starts out like this.
Okay.
Now,
This is
there's
Seven Samurai, right? It's like
Seven Samurai, which is
protecting-
one of the greatest films of all time. The Magnificent Seven is based on it. It's if you haven't seen
They
it,
should make a movie about this, it sounds like.
This is pretty cool. Well, the problem is though, then you start
Well,
running
we'll find
into well, you just start running into like Western colonialism
Oh, sure.
and who are they fighting against? Oh, they're just
Right.
killing Muslims. You don't want to really do that. But it's from what I've read, these guys did not like ride around and murder Muslims. They just protected the road from armed bandits.
Well, I won't greenlight the movie yet.
Yes,
we'll
so
find
we've
out.
got to find out just at least about these core guys.
Sure.
These guys weren't the guys running around raiding villages and doing stuff like that. They were too busy protecting poor
Mm-hmm.
people. And a lot of the times, pilgrims would travel together. And it sometimes didn't matter if you were a Christian, if you were Jewish, if you're a Muslim, you're a pilgrim. You're trying to go to worship at the holy site.
Yeah.
So they had a thing about protecting just everybody. God is love and all this, but if you try to murder us, we'll hit you with a sword.
God is love and blah blah blah.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's largely the Crusader thing. God is love, but I will kill you. So Huge and his crew do this. Now, a member of Hugh de Payne's party is the nephew of a guy whose name is Bernard of Clairvaux, later Saint Bernard of Clairvaux. So he's
a dog?
Maybe. He's a kind of a big mover and shaker within the church. Eventually, he's one of the creators of the Cistercian order of monks. He's a man of means. A lot of means. Like, he has influence everywhere. He's a cardinal.
Carries around a big jug of booze here.
Yep. He's got booze right here. It says XXX. Yep. If you get trapped in an avalanche, he will help you.
What a guy.
Great guy. So he basically takes it upon himself to adopt this organization. He's like, they're doing good work.
Okay. Where is he?
He, I believe, is still back in France.
Okay.
But because of that, like, he also goes to Rome a lot, because I think at the time he was either a bishop or a cardinal. And that's basically like being a lord. You have a lot of money and a castle, and you're just very well off. So he can talk to all of these people, and he talks to the Pope eventually and says they should become a formal organization represented and backed by the church.
Okay.
So after a couple of years, this happens, and then it becomes like the most popular charity in all of Christendom.
Oh, the Knights of
the Templar. So they just start throwing money at these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Now, originally it goes from 9 guys, and their symbol is literally 2 knights on a horse to symbolize that they're so poor they can only afford 1 horse for 2 knights.
Hey.
And I think that's kind of adorable. It's
Yeah,
like, well,
great.
we're coming for justice. Come on, Jim. And it is. It's like on their seals. It's 2 guys who look kind of uncomfortable and crowded together in full armor, and the horse looks miserable.
We can do it.
We got it.
Sorry, horses.
Here's 500 pounds of dude and armor. Sorry, horsey. And then they have no horses because all the horses are dead from being tired out of having these giant guys in armor riding on them. And everybody's dehydrated because they're in the desert. So they've start getting backing. They start getting recognition. They start being seen as like heroes, and then they start getting coin. A lot of it.
Oh.
And it goes from this organization of 9 guys to, at its height, 20,000.
Oh.
Only 10% of those are knights, but that's still...
It's a lot of people.
2,000 knights. I mean, that's the highest number it's thought to be. It's 10,000 to 20,000 records aren't great.
All right.
That's a big disparity.
Well, and is there any way to tell if someone's in it?
Not like so.
Like I'm part of it. Yeah.
Typically, so the Knights Templar all dress the same.
Okay.
They wear a white, what's called a surcoat. It's just like, kind of looks like a dress. It's over the top of your armor, belted across the middle, and has a giant red cross on the middle. And then they have a cape with either another red cross on the back or like on the shoulder.
Okay. I've seen images of that.
Unfortunately, it has been co-opted by a lot of white supremacists.
Oops.
That's a new favorite thing. That's a legacy of the Templar, is this part of this anti-Islamic extremism that you see is guys like espousing the Knights Templar. And this is one of the reasons we're going to...
I would like to go on record now that I'm not a fan of extremists on either side.
I'm not a fan of any extremist. I think...
Just let's go middle of the road.
Because, you got a big window in the middle there.
Sure, yeah, there's plenty of room in the middle.
Of wiggle room between exterminate, because that's also a symbol of the Templar. In modern Middle East, the Templar are seen as not good people. They're seen as the face of the Crusaders, who did horrible things in the Middle East. There are reports of babies being killed and roasted over fires, cities being just de-peopled to the point where, like, the streets just run red with blood.
Why won't people accept our religion of love?
Exactly. Jesus was all about peace. Die, infidel, die. And then, everybody says, like, well, the Muslims did the same thing. Never to this point. They never, like, de-peopled cities.
Right.
They did some bad stuff.
Let's move on.
So we'll move on. So, anyway, so the Templar are tied into the face of this.
Yeah.
And there end up being a couple of holy orders of knights. One of the most famous is the Hospitallers. They're the guys in the black robe with the white cross. And they stick to their vows very seriously. They do not They have rules about like drinking. They see themselves more as monks with a sword as opposed to a knight who's also a monk.
Okay.
The Templar start to become a little more secular. They still use their tithes to the church. They still collect their tithes, but they start building castles.
And I suppose the more people you get in your group,
you need places for them.
Yeah.
And like a lot of these make sense. You want castles as way stations for the pilgrims, so you can have your knights inside.
Yep.
And then the guys who aren't knights are either what's called a lay brother, who's somebody who's not fully trained in all of the ways of the church. They're more commoner, because you can't be usually a knight unless you're wealthy and landed.
Yeah.
So they would maybe be like a brother of the order, so they'd carry weapons, but wouldn't have like all of the equipment of a knight. Scribes, priests, and eventually they end up with bankers.
Oh.
The Knights Templar are one of the first banking organizations in the history of Europe.
Huh.
Because what they would do is they built these castles, and some of them were all the way back in Europe. They built headquarters as far as London. So there are still buildings that have their style of build.
Oh.
They had a very round architecture based off of the mosque that they headquartered out of. Because the irony of this is that they were the Temple of Solomon Knights. They took over the mosque as their headquarters, and then they're a Christian group operating out of this mosque.
So really, then at this point, that size of numbers of people, but they had no centralized place. But they did. It sounds like they had their own culture put together. So they're almost like a spread out nomadic cultural group. Like they're a city, but there's.
It's wild. So yeah, they've got knights. It becomes an international organization.
Yeah.
Instead of it just being like this group of knights who I think were all French. They've got Germans, they've got English, they've got Italians. They have people born and raised in Outremer eventually. So whatever culture that is, a mix. They have cities. They have chapter houses in Venice because it's a center of trade. They have them in throughout the Holy Roman Empire, Germany, in Paris or adjacent to Paris, and all the way, like I said, in London. They have guys in Scotland, so it's like the corner of Europe and all the way into the center of the like Islamic world. They have people. And because it's so popular as a charity, that people like the concept of, we guard pilgrims.
Yeah.
But then it starts having leadership who want political authority and power. It becomes a prestige thing. I'm in the Order of the Knights Templar. I've got the backing of the Pope. I can say and do what I want.
When do you suppose someone first said, "Don't you know who I am"?
I think it was a Knight Templar.
Within this group, that's what I'm saying. I feel like that's
do you know who I am?
That's a tipping point of any ego.
I feel like
egos tip too far now.
I feel like it might have been one of the founding knights.
Yeah.
The guy who was the saint's nephew probably was like, "Do you know who my uncle is?"
Well, someone.
And then probably the next generation. It was probably just the next generation of knights. Like, do you know who we are? Because the big giant red cross should be indicative
it's
of
some
who we
someone
are.
did something crappy, and then they said, "Don't do that," and they said, "Don't you know who I am?"
Yep, I can do what I want.
Yeah.
And this does happen. Now, not all Knights Templar are corrupt and evil people.
Sure.
But so their concept of banking is actually quite fascinating because they will loan money to monarchs. Because monarchs, they're always poor. They always are out of money. Because they have to largely pay for things out of pocket, and their wealth is based on land that they lease out to other people. That's the whole construct of feudal
Cash
Europe.
poor, as it were.
Yes. So they own all this land, and the rules are you pay me so much out of that land.
Yeah.
And they give that to lords. And then those lords divvy that up amongst knights. And then those knights give that to peasants. And then those peasants give them all money.
The peasants are like, "Why? We could just keep it. How about we just keep our money?"
Yeah. Can we just keep
In the
No.
first place.
No, if you live on our land, that was the thing, is peasants didn't own land. Nobles owned all the land, you just lived there. And you couldn't leave it.
Right.
That was serfdom, that was peasantry. You stuck to the land, you were bound to the land.
Okay. I want to talk about taxes and stuff, but we don't want to do that right now.
No, but
So also, why I'm confused. I'm baffled by the banking, but you can tell me some more. But because I think there's a thing in the Bible about like not.
They could not collect interest.
Yeah.
And that's one thing
Which
they did
seems
not
the
do.
entire model of modern banking system.
Yes. So actually, the modern banking system is technically it goes against everything taught in the Bible. That's illegal. It's in the New Testament.
Yeah.
It's called usury. It's a sin. The church was against it. It was sinful behavior. That was not acceptable. The Jews were allowed to trade with interest.
That's why we don't have that New Testament stuff.
And that's why a lot of Christians hated the Jews, because they would loan money, so people wanted money,
Yep.
but the Jews charged interest, because the Jews were also not allowed to own land at all.
So that seems unfair.
Yeah, so they couldn't own property, but they could own cash.
Okay.
So they had coins, and they could loan those out, and the only way they could get more was to charge interest.
Yes,
so it was like they were driven into this corner of society where this was literally all they could do. So they did it. Yeah. It was a purely
because coins by themselves won't grow.
Coins don't grow, right? And a lot of Jews weren't allowed to, being not allowed to own land. You can't own flocks of sheep. You can't own grain. You can't own this. So they got into banking and merchants, and that was how Jews survived. Okay. Otherwise, there was nothing they could do. So that's why they're kind of vilified as, oh, well, all the banks are Jewish. Well, yeah, because a lot of the first banks had to be Jewish because it's literally all they could do to survive in medieval Europe without being murdered or dying of poverty. And even that didn't protect them. But what the Knights Templar did...
I want to go on about the Jews running banks thing that people complain about in general. Sounds as though people brought it on themselves.
Yes.
By not letting them...
This is literally all they could do. They're like, so here we are.
You reap what you sow.
Here we are, a people without a land. We can't own anything. All we can do is rent. But we can have money, and we have some. Yeah. So how do we grow this money? Well, we'll loan it to people who don't have money, and they'll give it back to us, but more of it at interest, and then we can grow, because we don't have these rules that they have. We've never had rules about usury. And it's okay for Christians to pay interest, but not to charge interest. So it was a workaround. They could borrow money from the Jews.
Oh, I'm so sick of religion running things.
Yep. Right. So the Jews had to be very pragmatic about this. It's just a survival thing. That's really why Jews became bankers at this time and merchants, because it's literally all they were allowed to do. And you want to survive. You want your family to do well.
All right.
So yeah, let's
move on. I'm getting heated.
Getting heated. This is a self-imposed thing by the Christians upon the Jews, and that's why there are a lot of Jewish banks. Anyway, the Templar Bank didn't call itself a bank. It just called itself the Templar. They were just the Holy Orders of the Templar.
Yes.
They would offer coin, and they would take any investment that they ever got, and they just put it into like mercantilism, and then they'd use the profits of that to grow their coin. Sure. It was no interest, but that's how like banking worked. And the way they got money was they'd say, it's a long way to Tipperary. No, it's a long way to Jerusalem from France. You deposit...
And we're riding two on a horse.
Exactly. You deposit your coin with the chapter house of the temple in Paris.
Yep.
However much you want to bring with you. We will issue you this piece of parchment, this check, that says you get this much money when you go to Jerusalem.
Okay.
When you get to Jerusalem, give this to the temple, and they will give you this much coin back.
Oh, great. If you make it.
If you make it, yes. So there's the other part. They have to make it there. But this prevented you from having to carry hundreds of... Because coin's heavy. It's metal. Heavy. And you're just carrying chunks of it. And it's very heavy. And it runs the risk of getting robbed.
Yeah.
People are going to murder you.
So they're really offering a safe way to travel.
Yes, that was the whole point. It was a traveler's check.
Yeah, traveler's checks.
Yeah, that was the whole point of it. So they'd take your money while you were traveling. It takes months to get there. They could use that to expand their own wealth and then buy more stuff and keep doing this. And that was how they expanded their fortunes.
All seems fine so far.
So far, it's fine. However, when you start dealing with kings, you start getting political. And kings at this point start to realize their own power. They start realizing, I own all this stuff. Everybody owes allegiance to me, and I shouldn't have to pay all this to the church. And I don't like that the church is getting all this control. And things start to unravel for the Templar. It says the Templar, there are many holy orders of knights, and the Templar have been accused of a lot of atrocities and a lot of bad stuff. A lot of it is based on these aspersions cast against them by the church, and then also because they wear the cross, they're tied to the worst things that the Crusaders did. The Templars did not exist during the First Crusade, when the worst stuff was done.
It's not our fault, we're just wearing the uniforms.
They weren't even there. They didn't exist until 20 years after that.
Yeah.
They weren't part of, the worst massacres carried out by the Crusaders.
Probably not even born. Some of them.
Most of them weren't born, and the organization itself didn't exist at the beginning of this.
Yeah.
So this is like a fallout of it. And mostly they did stick to their rules. Now, there was brutality at this time. They did bad stuff. We don't have an exact thing of, are they the worst? They also get conflated with the Teutonic Knights, who were a Germanic order that come in later.
Oh.
And those guys were brutal. They basically were the foundation. I hate to do this because this is like this is such an internet thing. Hitler was a big fan of the Teutonic Knights. He used a lot of their imagery.
You know who liked the Teutonic Knights? Hitler.
So that's a problem. The Teutonic Knights were big on defending, but they persecuted non-Christians worse than anybody.
German area. What's
the Teutoburg Forest is where it's from.
Okay.
So we just talked about the Teutons. They were they were a group of Germanic tribesmen.
Yeah.
So it was a Germanic knighthood order, and they get tied in with the Templar because it's the Teuton and Templar, the T's.
Okay.
They look very different. Their style is very different. They had like these big horned helmets, very eccentric style, and their big thing was they just loved to fight and butcher Lithuanians.
Oh.
That was like their big thing. They had this crusade
against
the Lithuanians because they saw them as pagans, and they were like, "We're going to purify you because you worship."
Yeah, but all the little countries that bother with, leave Lithuania.
Well, Lithuania at the time was big. Oh. It was tied in with Poland, and they're like, "Well, we hate the Poles, who were Christians, and we hate the Lithuanians, who were new Christians, and we're just going to kill everybody." Caused this huge war. It was not good.
I'm of Latvian descent myself.
They also killed Latvians.
Oh.
They killed anybody. They were the extreme version of religion at the tip of a sword.
Great.
You convert or you die, like that kind of extremist. So they get tied in with that a lot. Yeah. And it's considered like a successor order because they weren't really popular then. They came up in like the 1300s. Well, they just hadn't been there yet. Then this is the case of extremism, right?
Sure.
So the Templar, though, they start getting tied into all these political things. And the big turning point is a king in France, Philippe IV.
Philippe?
He's called Philip the Fair. Not because he was honest or fair. It's because he was really, really good looking. He was so good looking that was what they called him, was Philip the Fair. There's not a lot of kings that are considered handsome in this time. So this should kind of paint the picture of, he must have been remarkably good looking by whatever beauty standards they have at the time. He has a giant nose that points upwards and huge droopy ears. Maybe that's what they thought was pretty. Not really sure. But he was Philip the Fair. He was also known as the Iron King because he was relentless. He was an autocrat and an authoritarian who believed that the power of the king was unquestionable by anyone, even God, because he felt he was appointed by God. Therefore, only God could tell him no.
Sounds like something a pretty boy would say.
Does sound like something a pretty boy would say. In fact, one of his rivals, who was a bishop, said, "He is neither man nor beast. He is a statue."
Ooh, sounds like someone's got a crush.
Well, it was just kind of nobody could read what he was going to do or how he was going to act. He was just intractable when he started doing things. You couldn't stop him. That was just his mindset. He married very well to, I believe it was like Eleanor or Isabel of Navarre, which was a small kingdom like in Spain. And so he got her lands. Oh. And then he's king of Navarre and France. So he's very powerful. He's got different titles across the rest of Europe, and his big thing is he doesn't want the church to tell him no.
Who does?
So this is how this all ties in with the Templar. The Templar only owe their allegiance to the Pope.
Yes.
They do not owe their allegiance to any king, any kingdom, anything. So they can operate anywhere, however they want. So you have this very elite group of warriors. Because the key thing for the Templars they are shock troops. They are very good fighters. They are famous throughout their 200-year history of being just really good in combat. Whatever side you want to take on it or whatever they're doing, in every battle they're featured in, they're pointed out as being like, they did this and they did some stuff.
Well done, guys.
They were
good work.
They were great in battle. And they were largely fearless because God is, even if we die for God, so it's fine.
Okay.
And they had like constant training and constant experience. When your whole life is you ride around with maybe a couple of other guys and you charge into groups of bandits to save, like you kind of get a big head because you're a hero.
Look at me.
Also, you're almost invincible against half the weapons you're going to deal with.
Yep.
Because of your armor, you're on a horse, and you do this
And you
all
have,
day.
And you have a righteousness as well.
You've got this zeal. I'm doing a good thing. Even if you weren't like the most religious guy, there's nothing wrong with defending people who are being murdered by bandits. That's a good thing, no matter who you are, unless you're the bandit.
Of course, yes.
But if you're a bandit, you're probably a jerk anyway.
Probably.
Like, oh, I'm going to go murder this little old lady who just wants to go worship.
The only good bandit is Burt Reynolds.
Smokey. No.
Bandit.
Yeah. Well, he was Smokey and the bandit.
Smokey is the cop.
That's the cop,
Chasing,
right?
yeah.
Okay. I have to see that movie. So I have to watch
You've
that.
never seen Smokey and the
I've never
Bandit?
seen Smokey and the Bandit. I've just seen it referenced a lot by the television show Archer.
I would
Like
watch
Sean
Smokey and the
Baker.
Bandit any day.
Well, how about we have movie night? We'll watch that.
There we
And
go.
Seven Samurai.
And King Ralph.
And King Ralph. And Caligula.
I just watched that myself.
You did? Caligula?
Yeah.
We'll have an after talk about that because that was last week. Was it as weird as we thought it would be?
No, it was really good.
Oh.
I mean, it was very rated X. I mean, it
Okay.
had like full on pornography scenes in
Oh,
it.
wow.
But also better, higher caliber actors. I had
Malcolm
Malcolm
McDowell's
McDowell,
in it.
Helen Mirren, and John Gielgud.
What?
All right.
What?
Yep.
Was Gielgud Tiberius? His uncle?
No, not John Gielgud. Yeah, John Gielgud. Yeah, but also
Peter O'Toole?
Peter O'Toole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Peter O'Toole.
So like 4 A-list actors I can
Yeah.
rattle off, and then
Good God.
Yeah, anyway.
Okay, maybe I gotta watch this. Anyway, where the heck was I?
Sorry, I really derailed that one.
It's okay.
We were
the
talking
Iron
about
King.
Smokey and the Bandit.
We were talking about bandits. So the Templar. So you've got this elite fighting force with pockets everywhere. You've got maybe hundreds of knights in France.
Yep.
So that's a huge breeding ground for that because there's a lot of nobles, and they have a lot of kids, and kids don't always inherit. Only the oldest typically inherits. So what do you do with your kids? Half of them join the priesthood, but there's only so many offices for the priests.
That's
So a
right.
bunch of them are like, okay, so I come from wealth, but my dad's not going to leave me anything, but he will give me a sword, an armor, and a horse, and I'm going to go join the Teutonic or the Knights Templar.
Oh, there you go.
And I will become a soldier for God
Usually, what you do now is just go to therapy,
because you can afford it.
and there are therapists. I mean, I don't think.
Well,
they
the
have...
nobility can afford it.
Oh, sure.
The peasantry can't
Anyway,
because healthcare. Anyway, so the Knights Templar acquire a lot of like young adventurers. I'm gonna go to the Holy Land. I'm gonna
Yeah,
serve
that's
God.
great.
I'm gonna stab bandits in the face.
I'm glad I'm not the oldest and have to take care of things back home. I can do what I want.
Exactly. I can do what I want. I get food and I get support and I get to be a knight and a hero and I get to murder the infidel. A lot of them are very driven by just I get to kill brown people. That's not good. But the ones who are noble and are like, yeah, I get to kill bandits who are trying to hurt innocent people. There's a nobility to that.
sure.
So they're like, yeah, let's do this. And when you come from a culture which is basically a bunch of murderers, like, because knights are trained to just kill people, and that's your culture, you really want to put them in a place where they can do that, because otherwise they just do it at home, right?
They're gonna murder somewhere.
They're gonna. That's why the whole idea of chivalry was invented. It was really pushed in France because you've got all of these guys sitting around with swords, going, "I'm gonna kill something." Why don't you guys have a tournament? Just beat each other up.
Sure, yeah.
Okay. Why don't you guys go on a crusade?
Yeah.
Over there.
That's how breakdancing started too.
Yep. Got a lot of pent up energy. Just
Maybe not. That's not really a direct connection, but
but maybe.
well, similar. I mean, breakdancing was an effort to get violence and gang fighting to be. How about we dance it off instead of?
That's a much better way. Like you say, you've said that almost every time we talked about war. Why don't we have dance offs and sing offs and stuff? Like, yeah, you get your most talented. So you think you can, dance, and instead you think you can own my country. Well, let's see. If you can outdance our best dancer.
Sure.
Yeah, I feel like you'd just get one country that's got really just the best dancers.
Yeah.
And they just beat everybody. It'd be like Lithuania, just somehow has the best dancers in the world. Suddenly they're running the world. Maybe that's not the best. Maybe one country with the best dancers shouldn't run everybody.
Maybe they should.
Maybe they should. We haven't tried it.
That's right.
All right. So moving forward with all of this, like the way this really erupts, though, is you have these elite warriors that you have no control over.
Right.
But the church does. And the church is already telling you what you can and can't do as a king. And you have this attitude of, nobody tells me what to do, I'm the king. So Philip runs afoul of Pope. I'm gonna make sure I get the right Pope because there's so many. Pope Jim. Boniface the Eighth. Boniface the Eighth. Now Boniface is known. This was the good Pope.
Okay.
He put down a lot of the rules of the church in official language and in official books. It was like, this is the rules of how we act. But he was really engaged in politics. He did not spend a ton of time in Rome. He would travel to different courts and go, this is how you act as a Christian.
Okay.
And he was kind of considered like a kingmaker, where he could just crush your political aspirations.
Oh, okay.
But he would stick his nose into into the king's businesses. And he was like, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that. No, you can't do this. Now, obviously, kings resent this.
Yeah, that doesn't bode well.
He does this to Philip.
Uh-oh. Not the Iron King.
Not the Iron King. Yes, the Iron King.
Oh, no.
And the Iron King really resents this. Now, Philip has this really accomplished statesman who works for him. His name is Guillaume de Nogaret. And de Nogaret is like his top guy. And by 1303, they're like bosom buddies. He is basically a hatchet man. He will do anything the king needs done ruthlessly.
Okay.
To the point where he says, this pope is a problem.
Uh-oh.
Let's just kill him.
Uh-oh. Papal side.
And Philip's like, yeah, I'm
Uh-oh.
fine with it. So he's like, well, maybe we won't kill him, but what we can do is we can depose him.
Oh, okay.
Which is the same as killing him. Once we get him out of power, if he has no power, then we can just knife him.
I mean, it's not the same as killing someone.
Right. No. But if we depose him, then they can knife him and it's not a problem.
Oh, I see.
If you take him out of the trappings
we
of
didn't
power.
commit papal side. Just a guy. He's now just a guy.
aside. And as a king, you can do that.
Yeah, I guess.
You can do that.
Okay.
So de Nogaret goes to Rome. And he starts finding guys who don't like Boniface. Because Boniface is the power of the church is supreme. And that means we maybe get more money and land from the nobility. He's not made a ton of friends. He's very much the opposite of... Well, he's very similar to Philip in the way that he believes in the sole authority of one thing, and Philip believes in the sole authority of another thing. So, clash.
Okay.
De Nogaret gets guys who are really just sick of this.
Okay. I don't know how he does that.
Landless.
Puts up signs.
He basically goes to the bars and he finds all these guys who don't like the Pope.
Who freaking hates the Pope?
Pretty much. I mean, he just goes to the bar and he listens. Okay, this guy doesn't like the Pope. And then he starts sending agents around throughout Italy. Okay. And he gets together a group of 1,600 people by the end of this. That's an army. And some of them are knights and professional soldiers. And Italy is filled with professional soldiers.
Oh boy.
Because it's just this fractious countryside. It's not a country.
Right.
It's city-states. And they're always fighting. And they typically just have mercenaries. So Italy is there's tons of soldiers, and they're happy to just take coin. So the ones that he gets that are true believers in get rid of the Pope, he's got plenty of them. And he's got plenty of adventurers who are willing to do whatever they want for coin. So he's got guys. He's got and also France is pretty wealthy. But also keeps borrowing from the Templar. So maybe money they borrowed from the Templar paid for this expedition, which would be kind of ironic. They surround Boniface at one of his estates.
Oh boy. Here we go.
Capture him. They kill a bunch of people to capture him, and they hold him for 3 days and beat the hell out of the guy. They beat the hell out of the Pope.
Jeez.
These good Christians.
That can't bode well for anybody.
Well, this makes the local peasants really mad, and local townships, and they
Not to mention the Pope.
To defend the Pope. They're furious. They're like, you beat up the Pope.
You can't do that.
You can't do that. Who do you think you are? And they storm in, and de Nogaret's like, oops, and he bails.
Jerk.
And he kind of leaves Boniface. And Boniface gets put back in Rome. He's like, well, that was stupid. I don't like that. And he cracks down on Philip more. He's like, you tried to murder me. He's like, well, I didn't murder you. I was just going to drag you to Paris and have you deposed in a sham trial to make you look stupid. That's all I was going to do. What? Everybody
murder? No one murders.
You. Well, Boniface is also an old dude. So they grabbed this old man and kicked the crap out of him for 3 days. And then...
We could have murdered you.
And they could have murdered him. Well, eventually he's old, so...
Aren't you happy we didn't murder you?
So Boniface eventually does pass away before, like, he can really crack down on these guys. And Philip's a little nervous that Boniface could have sicked the Templars on him.
Oh, sure.
The Templar are like, dude, you cannot beat up the Pope. There's an angry cat yelling at us now.
The cat does not like papacyde.
Doesn't like papacyde. Like, you can't just kill the Pope. That's
that's not a thing.
That's not okay. You don't just assassinate the heads of a church.
Look, we have some rules, but that's a big.
That's a pretty big one. Just don't murder people in general. Yeah. That's not cool.
But specifically,
the Pope. That's a big deal. It's the head of the church at the time. That's like the big one, right?
God on earth, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. According to Catholics, he's God's head of state. Yeah. He's his main representative. He is his chief priest, and you just beat the crap out of him.
Not good.
Like some peasant walking in front of your horse. You just beat the crap out of him, and you're like, oh, yeah, it's fine. For the most part, in Europe, this is not fine. Even the guys who don't like the Pope getting his nose in their business, this is not fine. And the Templar are really bristling about this. Now, they're spread out, so it's not like they send 10,000 men to go yell at the king. That's not how they work. And they're kind of waiting for the Pope to tell them what to do. The Pope passes away of just being old.
Yep. That'll happen to everyone.
That does happen.
Eventually.
He is replaced by kind of a placeholder pope. I think it was a Benedict. There's so many Benedicts.
Okay.
Benny. They tried to tell him, we want to have a trial against the dead pope.
Why not? We got nothing else to do.
He's like, no, we're not doing that. Well, he only lives for about 2 years, and then he dies.
Oh, boy.
His replacement is Clement V.
Hey.
Clement is French.
Doesn't sound French.
He was set in power by Philip and works for Philip.
Okay. Good plan, Philip.
He is a loyalist. Somehow he gets elected as the new pope. He takes the name Clement, because that's all popes take a name. He's Clement V. And he's immediately told by the King of France, so we want to have this trial of the pope.
2 popes ago.
2 popes ago. Saying he's a sodomite and engaged in sodomy, and they mean very much the sex act of sodomy, which is a huge no-no for them. It goes back to like what we talked about with Rome, where it's like every time they're trying to accuse somebody of anything else, you're like, he's gay.
Yeah.
Which is, in Rome that was fine, but with young kids, that's not fine. So you just throw sex acts.
Whatever accusation you can, and if people say,
sticks.
"Oh no, we're fine with that one,"
Right.
Oh well, how about this worst one?
It was a horse.
Okay, fine.
Okay.
We've drawn a line.
It was this guy's daughter. So you keep throwing things at it, hope it sticks. And they said that he was.
It also seems like often the accusation is enough.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is enough oftentimes. Well, we talked about this too with Baron von Steuben, who came to America and helped America. He was just accused of being gay and never got a job again in Germany.
Yep.
Horrible. Although he may have actually, in fact, been gay. And that's fine, because then America owes its freedom to a gay German. And I love that. So anyway, the Pope is accused of all this stuff, and they have this sham trial, and it's all written out. He's never convicted of it. He's dead.
Wow.
But it's just to justify the French king's vilification of this
How
Pope.
do you even defend?
Can't.
Well, I mean, but he was not. You said he wasn't. You said he wasn't.
A bad guy?
Convicted of it.
Yeah, he wasn't convicted of it.
Yeah.
But
Let me say after the trial, he wasn't.
Yeah, they never had an exact conviction, and they never exonerated him. It just kind of went on and petered out.
Oh, okay.
So it was a not definitive thing. And he's like, look, we charged him with this, and that's enough, and I'm the king.
Okay.
So they use this as justification, which is awful. Like, they just destroy this guy's legacy. They try to after he's dead. Yeah. And there's never been any recorded anything about his sodomy or him doing anything inappropriate. It's just an accusation from the King of France.
Well, we here at This Week in History would like to say St. Boniface was probably fine. Mr. Boniface. Pope Boniface
VIII.
He was probably fine.
He was probably fine. The worst thing that he did was he stood up to the king.
We'll stand on that.
I can't. That's the worst that I found.
That's all we know.
He wrote down some rules to get everything together and be like, this is how the church should act, and made the king mad. So, don't make kings mad, because then they just say that you're a pedophile.
After you're dead.
After you're dead. That's fair. can't defend yourself. No one's going to defend you, because if you defend somebody and the Iron King's in the room, you get disappeared by Denagare, who's just ruthless. I mean, he's already kicked the crap out of the Pope personally. He doesn't care.
So weird.
And Denagare does get excommunicated by the interim Pope.
Hey, remember that Pope you beat up?
Yeah. He's like, you beat the crap out of my predecessor. Meh. And I think he excommunicated Philip, too. Oh. But then after he dies, Clement shows up. He's like, never mind, that's fine. You're welcome back to the church.
Okay.
Because
Clement seems reasonable.
he's super reasonable. He's like, kings can do whatever they want. You can kick the crap out of a pope. That's cool by me. Well, now Philip has to clean house.
Okay.
He's been having problems with the Templar holding any kind of temporal power. They're a military power, and they have a ton of money. He also owes them a fortune.
Uh-oh.
So because of their stance against him when he kicked the snot out of the Pope, and because they wouldn't say he owes allegiance to the Pope and all of Christendom, and because of this, that, and the other thing, he decides they're the enemy now. So in 1307 is when this starts. He starts arresting the Knights Templar.
Oh.
He just says they're an illegal order, and they will not be allowed in France.
Okay.
So in October of that...
Mostly because he owed him money?
He owed him money. He owed him a lot of money.
It's a good way to get out of debt, I guess.
Yep. And
I don't owe you any money.
They did the exact same thing to the Jews, too.
Oh, boy.
Unsurprising. But unlike the Knights Templar, the Jews didn't have a military order to protect them.
Right.
So they would just get captured and beat up and tortured to give more money. It's awful. We could talk about that for forever. It's really bad. But anyway...
Templar.
The Templars are rounded up and tortured ruthlessly by the Inquisition. Like local...
The Inquisition?
Yes, they're here to stay. The Inquisition, what a day.
We're going to have to go into the Inquisition sometime, because I don't know much about that.
Yeah, and we can. The Inquisition has a lengthy history of doing bad things.
We can't do it today. No time.
Can't do it today. Nope. So the Inquisition gets involved, and they start grabbing Knights Templar and torturing the hell out of these guys. I mean, torturing at all is bad, but torturing the hell out of them, that's really, really bad. You know, it's very few of the guys actually survive the torture. We're talking hot pokers and all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
So they're torturing these guys into confessing that they were idolaters, and basically everything that was in the Vox Excelso is recorded as these guys said this was going on. But every single case of that kind of like confession was through torture and pain.
Oh.
Nothing gotten from somebody through torture and pain is reliable, because they just will say anything to make it stop.
Yeah.
Waterboarding, which is the new torture, which is arguably just as bad, if not worse, because you just keep thinking you're drowning, and that's horrible. They used all kinds of devices. They did pressing, where they just keep adding more and more weight onto your chest.
Yeah.
Awful stuff. We don't need to go into all the awfulness of torture, because...
Yeah, we'll talk about the Inquisition later.
We're going to talk about this another time. So they're torturing these battle-hardened dudes, and it's too much for some of them, and they break. They also don't want to be defiant to the church, and they know that the king's coming for them. They have no help. And it's not like all of the Knights Templar can just gather together in one spot and fight. And fights do happen, though. They make attacks on Templar castles, and the Templar warriors, they're not going to give up without a fight, and they believe they're working for God. Yeah. So not all of them give up without a fight. It gets bloody, it gets unpleasant, to say the least. And Philip winds up getting some of them to the point where he makes them confess to horrible crimes, and he has them publicly burned at the stake as heretics. So the warriors of Christ, like the armed defenders of the church, who have sworn oaths of poverty.
We thought we were on the right side.
And there's this... So they just dismantle this whole organization. They take the Grand Master, his name is Jacques de Molay, and they immolate him. I don't know if that's exactly where the term immolate comes from. Jacques de Molay, immolate. They set him on fire.
Yeah.
And burn him at the stake. And he never recants. He never says, like, we did this horrible stuff. So he's kind of seen as, like, this legacy figure, this kind of a legendary guy. And they go after the Templar. They burn a lot of them at the stake. They torture a lot of them. And they just hound them into the brink of destruction. And that starts in 1307 with, it was another papal bull. And this one was total bull, which was the Pastoralis Preeminentiae. And that was like the king has authority and he can do whatever he wants.
Okay.
And so they were hunted down and murdered in large numbers, and they scatter and they have to hide, like the remaining members, and they lose all rights to all property with a series of bulls that are passed. Another one is passed after all of this that gives all of their property to the Hospitallers, who, being like super charitable, adopt some of these Templar who are wandering around.
That's nice of them.
But it really, what ends up happening is, after the death of their Grand Master of the Order, that's Jacques de Molay, and all of these other knights, is the order is just completely annihilated. Now, this order has roads, castles, banks, all of this. It's a massive infrastructure, and it's an international organization, and it goes away like that.
Boom.
Just gone. And there's total chaos caused by this. So the legacy of that is that there's this mystery behind it. What happened? How much stuff did they have? And it really just boils down to the greed and like belief of kings that they should rule over all of this. And they just hammer this organization. So they use every tool at their disposal. They're heretics, they're monsters, they're villains. They have sex with sheep in their ritual. They do all this horrible stuff, and we destroy them. And then a bunch of the survivors end up basically getting adopted by Portugal. Portugal is a relatively new country, and they create a military order of Christ, is what they call it, in 1319. And they say, we're not going to punish the Templar. This is nonsense. These guys helped us with the Reconquista to take back our land that has been held by Muslim invaders for hundreds of years. They have shown nothing but loyalty to the papacy, to our king. We're not going to punish them for that. We don't care what any of you people say. We don't care what France says. We don't care what this puppet pope says. They're good folk. So it turns into the only existing order that actually comes for sure from the Knights Templar is this Order of Christ, which is still a thing. Oh, there's still the military Order of Christ. It was secularized in the 1700s, but it's still around. But all these other organizations, like the Masons, the Freemasons, have claimed, some people have claimed, they're connected to the Knights Templar.
Oh, okay.
Doesn't hold up under any level of scrutiny. They're not related, they're not connected at all. They were made in like the 1700s, but they like to be tied to this idea because of the mysticism behind it. You know, the Temple of Solomon, the Holy Grail,
people just doing good to do good.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You want to be tied to that. You want to be tied to like the mythology that's tied behind it of the body and blood of Christ and all of this stuff. But then the heroic defenders of Christendom, or however you want to. There are, like I said, a lot of extremist organizations that tie themselves to the Templar, which does not keep with their foundations. It's really fascinating, like how it's all tied together, but really, like, their legacy kind of died right there. Huh. And because of that, Europe's kind of rocked for a bit, and now they have to find like new places for the Templar to go, and it shifts a lot of the balance of power, and it causes some major ripples because they're like, oh no, now who owes all this banking? There's all this money that's up in the air, but suddenly, King Philip doesn't have any debt.
It's strange.
It's
wild. Clean that right up.
It's wild. It's a crazy story. And then, the fallout of it is the legacy of the Knights Templar have disappeared, but now they're this mysterious organization that disappeared because of this. But it was literally because this king had a grudge.
Yeah, and they didn't really have a centralized place.
No, like they're headquartered in Jerusalem, but it's not like that's where all of it goes. And because they rely on a lot of charity and a lot of they rely on the Pope, and the Pope turned against them. So once he delegitimized them, everybody said, okay, fine, we don't need these guys. And the Crusader states had fallen at this point. That's another key part of it. So they're like, what have you done for me lately?
Oh no.
What have you done for me lately? You aren't defending the Holy Land because you're not there anymore. Me. So these defenders of the Holy Land are no longer there defending it. And they use that against them. So it's like tied between this mystery ceremony of how they become Knights Templar, and they just make all sorts of stories up about that. And then they're not defending Jerusalem anymore because that fell a while ago. And then, but it really boils down to the king didn't like them, and he didn't want to owe them money. So
no one does.
No one wants to owe anybody money. So that's what happened with the Vox in Excelso.
All right. Well, as usual.
Out of time.
Well, it's overtime.
Yep.
I hope you enjoyed learning about the Knights Templar. Mm-hmm. And if you only know that if you watch the video, because the title is not going to mention that.
No.
It's secret.
It's a secret.
Tune in next week when we'll be discussing what?
The Vikings sack Paris.
Vikings?
Vikings!
All right, we are continuing our tour of Europe in general.
Yeah. We're staying in France kind of right now.
Okay.
But, yeah.
But we'll find out about that. I don't know anything about that. I didn't know that the Vikings got that far.
Yep.
We'll find out.
We're going to find out all about it. Mostly we're going to talk about Vikings and some Viking legendary peoples.
We'll discuss that next week. So like and subscribe, obviously, to the thing.
Share.
A thing I'm going to add to this as well. You can say it now if you say it quickly. We want to know where you are researching, but if not, we're going to include that in the description. So if people want to read the books and stuff that you're reading,
I can do that. That's a great idea. Ooh, I can start adding the books and stuff.
Yeah. So we're not rattle that off now because I threw it at him as a surprise.
But I was actually going to bring one of the books about the Knights Templar I have. I
will throw it in the description. All right, so tune in next week for This Week in History. It was This Week in History is Vox in Excelso. Thanks, Will.
You're welcome, Mike.
Talk to you later.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.